For today's devotion, we're going to take a look at a fascinating story from 1 Samuel chapter 5. Just before this chapter, we hear about the Philistines capturing the Ark of the Covenant. Now, the Ark of the Covenant, it represented the presence of God, that wherever it was, God was there as well. And so the Philistines have captured the Ark of the Covenant. And afterwards, it says that in 1 Samuel 5, it says they took it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. They carried the ark into Dagon's temple and set it beside Dagon. And so here we have this other god, the Philistines' god, Dagon. And that they worship this god, and we know this because they brought the ark right into the temple of Dagon. And so we know that this was a god that they would have worshipped, and now they've placed God, the Israelite God, the God we believe in, whose presence was with the ark. They've now placed the ark in the temple of Dagon. It says when the next day the people of Ashdod, they rose early the next day, and they found Ashdod to be fallen on his face before the ark of the Lord. Now, I think this is fascinating, right? That their God has, in its own temple, has just fallen face down before the Ark of the Covenant. It's kind of as though their God has fallen and bowed before the God that we believe in. Now, potentially this could be a fluke, right? And so we're told that they took Dagon and they put him back in his place. And then the following morning when they rose, there was Dagon, fallen on his face on the ground before the ark of the Lord. And so a second time now, this God that they worshipped had fallen and bowed to the ark of the covenant. Right? To me, this very clear act of saying, this is the true God, that the God, the Israelite God, the God that dwelled in the ark of the covenant, that this was the true God to be followed and believed in. And that all other gods, all other things that were claimed to be gods, that they would fall, that they would fail to stand up, that they would fall and bow down before the God of the Israelites. In fact, the second time Dagon fell, it says that his head and his hands were broken off, and they were lying on the threshold. Only his body remained. And so this time when Dagon fell, even his head and his hands, they broke off and they rolled over and were laying on the threshold of the temple. Now, what I find to be really interesting here, and maybe a good thing for us to reflect on in our lives, is that it seems utterly clear to me that Dagon does not stand up against the God of the Israelites. Literally, he doesn't stand up. He falls over before the face or before the presence of the Israelite God. And so it seems clear to me that then the Philistines would want to follow, would want to worship a God that is clearly more powerful, a God that is way more in control. But rather, it says rather that this is why that day the priests of Dagon nor any others who enter the Dagon's temple at Ashdod step on the threshold. I think that's interesting to me because rather than just abandoning their worship of Dagon, they actually now they call that threshold almost more holy, where they cannot stand on it because Dagon's head and hands fell on that threshold. And so maybe for me, the way that I apply this to my own life is thinking, is God clearly the God that's in control of my life? I'd say yes. I think he clearly is the God. He's the creator of this world. How could he not be the God that is in control of all aspects? But yet, do I maybe still, even though the evidence can be clear in my own life, do I still worship the other gods that I've been worshiping? Do I worship money, sports, my job? Are there other things in my life that I am still holding up, still holding as the highest priority in my life, even though they continue to fall short? See, the people in Ashdod, they worshipped this god Dagon, and Dagon literally falls before the God that we believe in. And yet, they continued to worship Ashdod. They rejected the clear evidence that was before them, and they continued to worship this God. In fact, where his hand and his head fell, or his head and hands fell on the threshold, they now don't step on it out of reverence for this God that doesn't even stand up. If you were to continue to read on through the rest of this chapter, you'd find that they actually ship the Ark of the Covenant off to a few more cities because everything seems to go wrong for them. That every time the Ark of the Covenant lands in their city, their own gods start to or things just don't go the way they had hoped. And so they ship it off to the next city. Because they fail to worship it, they're fearful of it, and so they just send it off. Well, eventually it ends up back in the Israelites' presence, and or they continue to then worship that God, the true God. And so I guess for me, the question today is God clearly, are the gods that you are worshiping, are they falling short? Do they fail to live up? And are you still worshiping them? Or are you willing to go and worship the God that is clearly way more powerful, the God that is in control of all aspects of this world?